Welcome back. If you're watching this video, you are either a student in the class for at the Arts Academy at Benjamin Rush, or you are a teacher or student that is utilizing my website. We're specifically working on health education, and we're talking about the introductory unit of wellness. And the very topic that we're specifically talking about is Pisces. Yesterday, before I talk about today's lesson, I want to review some things. The Pisces topic page, of course, is here, and as you scroll down, there is the slideshow that I'll be teaching from. Here is some articles about ways to extend your life and stress and anxiety. There's also a specific section down at the bottom I really want to focus on, and that is the special focus physical activity benefits all of Pisces. We're going to come back to this, but if you are watching this video, the link will be in the description. Come to this particular web page and be able to view it on your own. That being said, to review, Pisces is a five-part, um, five parts to the whole idea of a full body wellness. When you're healthy, you might just be considering physical things. Wellness is being healthy in all of the areas: physical, intellectual, social, emotional, and spiritual. Previous video that will be linked to at the end of this video went and explained to you what each of those dimensions means, and it also went and explained that there are additional dimensions occasionally included on Wellness Wheels when other places are posting information about them. But let's unpack this more. And today's lesson, the main focus is the five critical behaviors to help us stay healthy. Notice the five is in quotes. It's very important there. When we start off, we have to talk about death. And in terms of death, death is caused by four things, and that's it. It's the only thing that causes death. First is communicable disease. So in this country, it's not as common as you think. Most people, when they think of communicable disease, they think of things like the flu, the cold, COVID. We certainly know, based on the result of 2020, that COVID can kill, but statistically speaking, people die each year from the flu and other things like that. And there are also some communicable diseases that are really major, such as, for example, hepatitis B and HIV and some other things that can be spread from one person to another that can cause death, certainly cause death if they're not treated or if you have a hampered immune system. Luckily for us, we live in the United States with modern medicine and we do have the opportunity for medication. Um, I will say a statement that that has been said a lot of times by wellness professionals. It's almost like we live in a sick care society rather than a healthcare society. Whereas doctors are trained, by no fault of their own, but doctors are trained to treat symptoms to make someone feel better. And oftentimes that's attacking the diseases and germs, but other times it's not. So, what wellness is and health and wellness is pretty much teaching you the tools to be able to prevent these things from happening in the first place. So, in order to fight communicable disease, since we're still on that one, you would do things that would strengthen or strengthen your immune system or keep your immune system strong. And you would try to do things to prevent the spread of disease or getting the spread of disease. So those are things like that. With non-communicable disease, those are diseases that typically do not spread. Common examples of that would be heart disease or stroke or most forms of cancer, where if I have it, you won't get it, but it's something that I have to deal with and it's a disease that I have to deal with. So non-communicable disease. Again, we're talking physical for all intents and purposes when we say this. Um, if you're talking mental health, it's not really mental health diseases, more so disorders, but a lot of a lot matters with the terms that you use. But I digress. Let's come back to this slide. Risk factor dangers. Risk factor dangers are things that we do that cause death to ourselves. Examples of that could be using drugs or excessive alcohol or smoking tobacco or not wearing your seatbelt or not paying attention or walking into the street without looking both ways. So risk factor dangers, things that are part of our behaviors and things that we do. So what are the top 10 killers of teens in America? A trigger alert, you might want to fast forward a bunch if you don't want to hear data and information about the top 3 causes of death and where we get this information from. So first of all, we have accidents and unintentional injury, homicide, and suicide. Those are the top 3 causes of death for ages 15 to 24. This information came from a 2021 report from the CDC. After making this video, I'm actually going to look to see if we can reset the filter to see if there's a more updated report. But it comes out each year for the previous year, and they pretty much skip years. So 2023, there should be a report for 2022. At this point, 2021, there was a report for 2020, and you get the idea. And if you look here at the top 3 causes of death, it goes by age ranges. So you have less than 1 years old, 1 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 24, which is what we're focusing on. Let's highlight that for a second. 25 to 34, and then it keeps going all the way up to 65 plus, and then all ages in general. So if you look at all ages, heart disease is still the #1 cause of death in America, and cancer, malignant neoplasms, are still second cause of death. Depending on what part of the country you live in, that might be flip-flopped. And with age ranges, that could be flip-flopped as well. So ages 45 to 64, cancer is a higher cause of death than heart disease. And then you see a lot of stuff on here. But we're really focusing on unintentional injury being #1, homicide being #2, suicide being #3. If you go back to the slide, you notice that there's arrows almost pointing homicide and suicide together. Homicide, of course, the fancy name for murder, and suicide, of course, we know what that means when one kills oneself. So you can see that from ages 15 to 24, homicide is the #1 cause of death, and suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death. But for ages 10 to 14 and ages 25 to 34, suicide is #1. Homicide is #3 for ages 25 to 34, and cancer is 3 for ages 10 to 14, but homicide is still 4. So suicide and homicide are 2 of the most major causes of death. Unintentional injury is the #1 cause of death for ages 1 all the way up to 44. So that's something that we really need to consider and we really need to pay attention to in terms of our safety, and that is trying to avoid unintentional injury and accidents. The one thing I want you to notice about these 3 things is that all of them can be influenced by alcohol or drug abuse quite frequently and quite often, right? And they're also all a result of short-term behaviors, either something that you do for do yourself or to yourself, or something that someone else does to you. Accidents can be either, and then of course we know homicide and suicide. Here's the rest of the list as of 2021, keeping in mind the data is from 2020, so that's why COVID-19 is so high. But you see the list, and we don't have to go through each one. We'll talk about some of these throughout the rest of the class, but for the most part, we're not going to focus so much on specific diseases or things. That would be something you would do in the second half of health class if it was a full-year class. But we'll talk in general about how to prevent diseases, communicable diseases, and chronic diseases that are not communicable, and risk factor diseases throughout the course. So you noticed and you saw this already, but just to reiterate, the older you get, the lower the rate of suicide and homicide. They both go down. Cancer and heart disease both go up. And you can see the data on this link as well. So 2 different links. This specific one talks about suicide. The last one, of course, was the data from the CDC. In 2018, CNN reported a CDC finding that there were 5 critical behaviors that could add at least 10 years to a person's life. Disclaimer, I will say that all 5 of these things are physical. If you're watching this lesson video because you were absent from class and you didn't get a chance to do the As You Went or brainstorm, then why don't you pause this video and try to figure out what the 5 critical behaviors are before going forward. Alright, assuming that you pause the video, then what are the 5 critical behaviors? Here they are. #1, the single worst thing you can do to your body is smoke, so tobacco or nicotine use. There's a hyphen there because vaping products do contain nicotine, which is a highly addictive chemical that also can lead to heart disease. But there's not any tobacco in vaping products. Tobacco, of course, not only has nicotine in it to be able to cause heart disease, but it also goes and contributes to the possibility of developing cancers, especially cancers of the lungs, gums, throat, and mouth, among other things. Number two, the healthy body mass index. So the really short version of that is how much of your body is fat compared to lean body mass, um, bone, organs, and things like that. Things like that. So healthy body mass index is essential to be able to maintain good health and contribute to years of your life. Number three is physically active. And I mentioned to you on this webpage the importance of being physically active. And physical activity, you probably noticed if you did the lessons from lesson one on Pisces and did the small group activity that physical activity and exercise benefits all five of the dimensions of oneself, particularly the physical self, intellectual self, social self, and emotional self. There's some articles down here about how exercise in the brain, how fitness impacts learning, how exercise helps in maintaining stress management for high stress jobs, how regular exercise activates happy hormones and it can be treatment for mental health, how you can manage stress with exercise, and the benefits of exercise for children's mental health. So this is all important for us to recognize. As I mentioned, all of these things are physical, and that's because the article focused on physical health. It didn't really talk about mental health, emotional health, social health, or spiritual health. So doctors would agree that the number one thing that would be added to this list of five to make it actually six things is stress management. Yeah, stress, or specifically stress management, is near the top of risk factors associated with heart disease, cancers, and is a part of emotional health. And failure to manage stress will have physical effects on one's body. One of the things we're going to learn when we learn about stress is that the physical effects of stress and not managing stress on one's body. It's really bad, and we need to make sure that we learn ways to be able to do this as best we can. Sometimes you can't help but be stressed, but we need to be able to find a way to be able to cope and be able to manage these things. But what else? There's additional things that can optimize health and wellness, and here's a list. And correct use of medications, no abuse of drugs, safe and safer sexual interactions, no texting and driving, no drinking and driving, wearing a seatbelt when you're driving, live positive social interactions, much better than just on chats or social media in terms of health. Limiting risky and unsafe behaviors when possible. That could include violence. That would include things like wearing a helmet when you're riding your bike on the open road and things like that. Positive expressions of one's feelings, and at least 8 hours of sleep on a regular basis. It's a little difficult to do that if we're staying up late all the time, getting up early for school or work. But and and ideally, people really do need between 6 and 8 hours of sleep to be able to function properly. So know what your body needs, but the recommendation from healthcare professionals tends to be 8 hours. The optimum time for sleep is 10 to 6. There's some additional work on sleep that you're going to be asked to do for homework, and additional webpage if you want more information about that. Is there anything else? Well, of course there is. It's drinking water, vitamins and mineral supplements, because you can't get all the vitamins and minerals that you need in just the food you eat. Wearing sunscreen, especially if you have lighter skin. People with darker skin have more melanin than people that have lighter color skin. And melanin is a natural defense mechanism that your body creates to be able to protect against sun. Um, there's a lots of different articles and research about um, the effects of melanin. And more or less, we can tell you that a person with darker skin has anywhere between 6 and 11% better chance to protect themselves from the sun than a person with lighter skin. That's not to say that people with darker skin shouldn't use sunblock. That will increase their protection from the sun, but they're unlikely to burn as easily and have more permanent skin damage and or develop skin cancers. It's not impossible, so again, consider using sunscreen, but there's a thing. Regular checkups from your doctor. As you know, the School District of Philadelphia is partnering with City Health to give free checkups and free physicals, so that's something that you need to consider. Washing your hands frequently, that will decrease the spread of the germs associated with the common cold and flu. vaccinations and preventative treatment, although there is controversy about certain vaccines and whether or not you need them or not. The best thing for me to say as a health teacher is for you to talk to your parents and talk with your healthcare providers about what the proper vaccinations are for you to be able to get and to be able to protect yourself. The last button says laugh, and that's something that we need to learn how to do. Sometimes we need to laugh at things that happen, not just because they're funny, but because they're part of life, and you have to be able to be used to these things. Yeah, there certainly is other things. There's other things that we're going to have to do because each person is an individual. So you have to make sure that we're individually healthy. So think about these things, these list of things here, the list of things on the previous page. Let me go show that to you again. List of things on the previous thing. And of course, what the 5 critical behaviors are, along with stress, to be able to maintain health and wellness. And you do these things, and you'll be able to make sure that Pisces stays strong. Thank you. See you in class.